Hello, and welcome to the Momentum Ministry Partners podcast. This podcast is designed to provide that momentum in our God-given roles of leadership as we partner together to equip today's Christian leaders for tomorrow's opportunities. Thank you so much, and we hope you enjoy this episode.
Welcome back to another episode of the Momentum Ministry Partners podcast. I'm your host, Eric Miller, and today I have with us our Momentum Ministry Partners Communication and Fundraising Director, aka my wife, Bethany.
Hi.
So, hello, welcome.
Thanks.
In today's episode, we're going to be talking about dating and marriage.
We don't know anything about that.
So I thought this is kind of part two from last week's episode where we interviewed Pastor Greg Foote, and we talked about high school sweethearts and how that's not really a thing, and we're not either. So, yeah. But our goal, Bethany, for this conversation, just kind of to put it out there for our listeners who are maybe checking out this episode. It's not necessarily to just tell our story. We don't want you as a listener to like walk away and think like, oh, how cute are they? But
Though we are
cute. You're maybe more cute than me, but
thanks. But yeah, there's more to the story than just being cute.
Our goal, like honestly, in this conversation is to have open, honest, real, authentic conversation about dating and marriage. God took us on a journey. We're still on that journey. This month is April. If you're listening to this, we're now into the month of April in 2023. And so it is our 10-year anniversary. Woo! We're celebrating. But spring is officially here. The sun is shining in Northeast Ohio. Sure. Opening day baseball is starting. There's lots of spring fever is going on. So how's that? We're wanting just to engage in this conversation and talk about singleness, dating, marriage, and kind of tell our story and maybe some of the things that we've learned along the way. So let's kind of dive into this conversation. I wanted to just recount and start off with the same thing that Greg and I talked about last week in preparation for this discussion. I was curious. I had this random thought. I was like, I wonder if there are stats on marriage and dating out of high school and even in college.
Sure.
And so I did a little research. I did a little Google searching, and I found that 2% of high school dating relationships end in marriage.
Wow.
I told Greg last week, I honestly would have thought that it would be single digits, but I was not expecting it to be that low. Because kind of everybody, probably everybody knows a couple that's we met in high school and we got married and we're high school sweethearts.
My parents are actually. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay.
My parents started dating in high school, but I guess I would be curious even how, is that stat for today, or is that is it different for different generations?
I found it in a bunch of places.
Okay.
So
I mean, I have no idea, but that's just a curiosity of maybe once upon a time it was more common, but let's just be clear that for today, 2%.
But I just thought if you have a youth ministry of, let's say you have a large youth ministry of 100 middle school and high school students, right? 2%. How many of your students are dating? Probably several, many of them. But the odds are not good. They're not in your favor. If you're a student and listening to this and you're dating you're in high school,
we're not saying to go break up with your boyfriend or girlfriend. We're not.
Nope.
But let's be realistic about the likelihood of those high school relationships working out. Because I dated some guys in high school, and you're not one of them. So, those relationships did not work out. And that's okay. I still learned a lot from them.
Yeah. I didn't officially date anyone in high school. I had lots of girls who were interested. I mean, I was beating them off with a stick. Let's be honest here.
I mean, of course you did.
But
of course you did.
The irony is I made up for that in college. And yet I actually...
you might need to clarify what you mean by that.
I made up for not dating in high school. I dated a lot in college. How about that? Yeah.
All right.
But I see where you're going. The funny thing is, I've never actually broken up with anybody. Every girl every girlfriend I ever dated, they broke up with me.
Except for me.
Except
Let's
for
be
you.
clear.
Thank you. Praise the Lord.
Broke your streak.
But like it's dating is hard.
Yeah.
Breaking up is hard. Ending of those relationships, even if it's not like super serious, there's still a like if we're honest and we want to be honest, there's still like a grieving of that relationship.
Sure.
And it can affect other relationships. It can affect your spiritual walk. It can affect your mental health. It can affect like all kinds of other things.
Yeah, even when you know it's the right thing. You know, I think about a time when I was talking with a friend. It was after we were married, and she was single, and she had been dating someone and broke up, and so was newly re-single. And I remember her saying to me, she knew it was the right thing. And so she wasn't even so upset about it not working out with him as she was. Now, she was not in high school, let's be clear. She was an adult woman, but was just longing to find her person and longing to find her husband and wanting to reach that next stage of life where she would be married and start to have children and those things that she had dreamed about. And so she was grieving the fact that that wasn't happening for her. You know, she admitted he was a nice guy, but they weren't a good fit for each other. So it was a good thing to end the relationship, but that also meant she wasn't any closer to that desire of hers. And that was hard. And I think that that's valid. That's something that's real.
Well, and you can also go the other side and look at the beginning of a relationship and how you get that like longing and the desire, and we're not that old. I can very easily remember being in high school and even in middle school and in college, and my mindset going into like I had a person that I like, and I would, you know, you begin to tell your friends about it. You begin to like put out feelers. You begin like that whole process. And if I'm honest, like again, looking back on that all affected my all kinds of things. I changed who I was for many of those. Like I did silly and dumb things. I signed up to run cross country for a girl one time, and I was not a cross country person. I was a baseball player. Like I called my mom collect at a gas station at like the second practice and was like, I'm not doing this. Come pick me up. Like some of you don't even know what call and collect is. You don't even have that issue anymore. Yeah. Maybe I am that old.
I was maybe thinking that we are older than we'd like to admit, but
honestly, like there are so many times where you begin to hang out with people that aren't necessarily even your friends. Like those dating relationships change a lot. And again, that's not always bad. Right. But I think it's something to be aware of. So Bethany, I was
going to say there's a difference between flexibility and being willing to, you know, like you were just saying, it's spring and it's opening day of baseball, and I know that's important to you. So maybe that's not super important to me, but I make room for you to watch opening day baseball games and babysit and watch them with you. Okay, that's flexing, right?
She said maybe. She said maybe. There's a chance. There's hope.
But that's flexing, where you know, I can go to a baseball game with you and have a good attitude about it and enjoy it because it's important to you.
Right.
But I don't need to like pretend like I'm this sports nut now because it's, you know, there's a big difference between flexing in relationship and making room for your other person and supporting them and the things that are important to them and changing your identity and your personhood. Yeah. And I think especially when you're young, I'm thinking high school, college, even young adult, where you're still trying to figure out who you are. Yeah. That's tough to wrestle with.
Yeah. All right, so let's do this just for the sake of our listeners. Let's give just a brief, if we can do this in like a couple minutes, because I know we can both be verbal processors and long-winded. But let's give like a rundown of kind of our, not necessarily every relationship, but like dating history that led us to each other.
Oh, you did not tell me we were doing this.
What do you think? It was in the notes that I sent you.
What notes?
All right.
Okay, you go first then.
All right.
How's that?
So I kind of already stated like I didn't date a lot in high school, but I definitely had people that I was interested in, and I definitely had a lot of like boneheaded things. I remember writing a girl a note, and I said like, "You're the only fish in my pond," and I thought that was really smooth, right? Yeah, it was bad, super bad. And later, after I gave it to her, my friends were like, "You're an idiot. Why did you do that? Why did you do that?" That's,
it's important we learn these things young. Let's say that it's important to learn these things young.
Yeah. So oh man. Like I had this desire to like be friends first with people. And that was kind of this principle, that I felt like was very important. I'd watched some of my friends from youth group and school that they didn't know this girl, but they thought she was pretty. And so they wanted to date her, and they would get in all kinds of hot water about that and trouble on all kinds of different fronts, like emotionally, physically, spiritually, like all over the place. It would end all of our relationships with them. It was awful. Right. So I wanted to kind of be friends and get to know people. And in that process, there were many of these girls that I liked that I didn't actually end up dating, because as I got to know them, I realized this isn't going to work. Right. So in college, then my freshman year of college, man, did I make some boneheaded mistakes, because freshman year of college, everyone kind of small Christian school, everyone starts pairing up. All my friends are dating. I was super lonely, and I made some really bad choices with girls that I was dating. I won't even go into all, we don't have time for all that. So, long story short, ended that relationship, dated another girl about my sophomore year. I thought she was the one. She ended up breaking up with me after about, 8 months of dating, and broke my heart, crushed me. And I didn't know why. Come to find out, like months later, there was history with her dad and her family upbringing and her parents.
She had her own things to wrestle through.
Yeah, but I didn't realize any of that at the time. I didn't realize how your parents play a part in your relationship. So that was a new kind of thing for me to learn. Probably every year of college, I dated somebody different. Probably I allowed my emotions to get the best of me, and I dove into those relationships way faster than I needed to, and put more stock in those relationships.
And probably faster than she was ready to.
Probably. At
least for some of them.
Because you know some of those stories.
Right.
Yeah. And yet, in doing so, I think as I'm looking at the patterns and the themes, I can look back and see I added stress to the relationship by doing so, and not allowing it to go at the speed or pace that was right for both of us.
Sure.
So I then became a youth pastor. I graduated college, had my heart broken a number of times, kind of were putting all my eggs in this basket, and this is going to work, and this is going to lead towards marriage. And probably for several of them, in doing so, was the downfall of the demise of the relationship.
Well, and I think it speaks to a deeper desire that you had to be married, and 100%. To kind of this image that you had in your head of what that would mean, and wanting to be married and have a family and all those things, which that desire is not bad.
That's true. Yep.
But looking
100%.
back, recognizing maybe not going about it the healthiest way.
Well, and if I'm honest, like even looking back at my time in high school, I very much had this like, well, I want to be a youth pastor. I want to be a family guy. I want to be a good husband. And I dreamed about having kids. And so while a lot of my friends were starting that process in college, I felt super left out. I honestly felt like God had forgotten about me. I felt like I was watching all my friends get married. I was in countless weddings. No lie, probably a dozen weddings before I graduated college. So a lot of my really, really close friends were getting married, and I felt like God had forgotten about me. And I'm like, but God, I'm like, I want to serve you. I'm trying to go into ministry. I'm giving my life to following you, and you're not giving me my greatest desire. And so then I like graduated. I college, I went to Maryland, was a youth pastor there, made some more poor choices in dating where I would say I settled in dating relationships for best available because I
trying to make
was
something
longing
work.
for that. Yeah, exactly. I was forcing the issue. Call it square peg in a round hole, right? Like that was a big deal to me, and I learned some really hard lessons through that. Ended up being single for my first 10 years of being a youth pastor, and then I was speaking at a camp in Pennsylvania, and my roommate at the time, who was all about Christian online dating and on multiple sites, signed me up for online dating on this Christian website, and I was really against it. I can't even express how against it I actually was, but I made him a deal. I said, I will do the 10-day free trial, and then we will never speak of this again. And to make a very long story short, lo and behold, in those 10 days, I met you.
I was going to say, how'd that work out for you?
Met you.
So,
worked out very well.
So then let's pause and then go back.
Okay.
I will try to be super brief.
Your turn.
In my story, looking back at high school, I started dating, I think, my freshman year of high school, and dated a couple of guys. And I think very much pretty typical, like high school, super excited when somebody likes me. And that was exciting. And somebody thinks I'm pretty and worth pursuing and that kind of thing. And most of those in my first couple of years of high school were very short-lived. We're talking like 2 months. Maybe. So very, very exciting and then very over. And then I did date a guy for about 2 years, kind of in the end of my high school year into college, which is so funny looking back. I think even at the time we knew we were very different, and we went to different schools, and that probably created more room for us to look past certain things of like having very different friend groups and that kind of thing. But we didn't hang out during the day at school because we were at different schools. So, and some great things about that relationship and some not great things about that relationship. So, ended up, honestly, I think I look back at that and going, one of the most mature things of that time of my life was realizing the trajectories that we were on were really different. And the kind of life I wanted to create for myself was one that he was not going to create the same kind of life for himself. And so we parted ways. And then in my college years, dated here and there, but really didn't have any serious relationships. And it started in like where you were at a small Christian school and very much pursuing a ministry path. I went to school and had a relationship with Jesus. I never walked away from that, but definitely started walking more in a worldly, cultural path. So doing some partying and things of that nature, worked really hard on school and then partied really hard on the weekends. And so through that, flirting and dating guys who didn't have a Christian perspective and things like that. And that really carried on through my 20s. This is a major gloss over, but like moved a couple different states and things like that. And so landed in New York, and so was doing a lot of partying and a lot of dating guys that I should not have been dating. And so a lot of dead end places. And again, no real significant relationships during that period of time. And then again, I'm glossing over a lot here, but just for the sake of time, but part of my testimony is I tell people God's got a way of like tapping you on the shoulder and being like, excuse me, back over here. You belong over here with me. Yep. And so he did that with me at one point, and at that point ended all of the dating I had been doing with all of those dead end guys, and was getting more involved in church groups and things. And in that, I did end up dating someone from one of those church groups, and that was a very detrimental relationship. And I think some of that was I was still trying to get my feet under me of what does it now look like to be a Christian. And so he's a Christian, so clearly that's just all great, right? And no, it was not, and learned a lot of things about him that were unhealthy in that process. And in my, I don't want to say new faith, because it was more of a rekindling of faith, but in spiritual immaturity was allowing him to not be an emotionally healthy person in my life. Right. And so ended that relationship, and then was single and Christian on Long Island in New York, which there is not a lot of single Christians out there. So the dating pool was pretty slim. So that's how I ended up looking at online dating. Was I did reach a point in my life where I think I reached a really healthy place of, hey, I want to get married at some point. And by this point, we're talking late 20s and wanting to get married and have kids and have a family, and looking around and going, but there's not a lot of options that I'm just stumbling upon.
Yep.
But I did feel like I was holding it in a really healthy place of like, hey, online dating is just another option to try. And if it works out, great. And if it doesn't, oh well. And so that was kind of how I went into that, and then met you.
Yeah. So I think as we look back, this is hopefully a helpful exercise. There are themes to our listeners. The heartbreak of ending a relationship, whether it was a good breakup or a bad one, that's real.
Yeah, there's grief.
We could talk all kinds about that. The pain of dating relationships where God isn't the center. We've both learned that.
Yep.
The difficulty of trying to like do things our own way and not trusting God to lead in a relationship or bless a relationship, or not having a good foundation in that relationship.
And I think what you're getting at is having an image of what we want and trying to force a person into that image. Like, well, this is what I want. And so this person's here. So clearly they can make all those dreams come true.
Yep. Or expecting them to be someone they're not.
Yeah. And it's not fair to them or to ourselves.
And dating really can be a good, or even being friends first, use my principle from early days, but that process of like learning what it is that you're looking for is a good thing.
Oh yeah.
That is a very good thing. But when you find it, when you identify what it is that you're looking for, you have to be honest, and maybe you need the Lord and other people's help, other people who love the Lord, to help you figure that out. Is that this person? Yeah. Where if
wise counsel.
If we're honest, we both were convinced that other people were that person. And then I think then you try to when you think that of the person, I think we both did this game where like we're in a committed relationship. And so we maybe stayed in relationships longer than we should have, rather than saying, hey, we're not covenant marriage. We're not there. We probably could or should break up.
Right.
This isn't healthy. This isn't beneficial.
Right.
And yet we're just trying to make it work, and it's hard, and it's clearly not working.
Right. Right. And that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. Yep. And it doesn't necessarily mean that there's anything wrong with the other person. Yep. I mean, yes, there is
like those lies, though.
Like we are both two people in a relationship. We are both sinful, broken people. So we are always both going to have unhealthy things we need to work on and overcome. By the same token, if you're both in a relatively healthy place, that doesn't mean that marriage will come out of that.
Right.
You know, that it's okay to say this just isn't a good fit.
Yep.
You know, that doesn't have to be anybody's downfall. Yeah. It's just not a good fit. So if I can even share something that I had kind of learned along the way through that process, and I've used with single women and young women who I've talked to. We've done a lot of
counseling and consulting with youth groups and premarital counseling, and I know
with you
where you're
as
going.
a pastor and a youth pastor, we've had a lot of young people in our lives over the years. Yeah. So one of the things that an analogy that I started using with people is that you know, your wish list for, and I use this mostly with girls, so I'm going to talk about it from that perspective of what you're looking for in a husband. But guys, you can flip the switch and do it that way. But if you're looking at what do I want in a husband, what am I searching for? I always say there's different levels of that. So it's like, what is written in stone? So for me, I'm a heterosexual woman. It has to be a man. like, let's start at the very basic, right? So it needs to be a man. And while this was not true for me for a long time, once I really came back to the Lord and started living my life in relationship with the Lord and for the Lord, I realized that being a Christian, that was a
Non-negotiable.
This is written into stone.
Yep.
I will not bend on this.
Yeah.
So there's like those things, and there's probably very few things on that list.
Right.
And then to realize like, hey, then there are things that I'm going to write down in permanent marker. Right? I'm pretty confident that this is what it's going to be. So for me, in my 20s, I looked at that and even said, okay, it's really unlikely that I'm going to enter into a relationship with a guy who has kids.
Right.
Right? But I can't really say never. Like maybe there's a situation. Was he widowed, or was he, living a life outside the Lord at one point and then came to the Lord later? Well, who am I to judge that? I did that too.
Sure.
Could there be an outlying situation? Yeah. Sure. But the likelihood is not great. So this takes a lot of self-introspection, I think, and time with the Lord to like develop this list. So there are those things that are going to be written in permanent marker. Then there are things that are going to be written in pen, which are less serious, but like, hey, I'm pretty confident.
Yeah.
If I want to stay living where I am, I probably need someone in this geographical area. Then it's like all the way down to like, what do you write down in pencil?
Yep.
So for me, we laugh about like, I would have loved to have a husband who dances, and that is not Eric.
I dance.
You have many.
I have danced.
Against your will. Greatest accomplishment of my life is that he danced with me at our wedding. But
I swayed back and forth. How's that? Yeah.
But let's be real. That is something that is not enjoyable to you.
Correct.
And not something you will willingly, or you do it for me on occasion.
Correct.
But you do not enjoy it. Like if I had designed the dream man, I probably would have had him be someone who danced.
Sure.
But God said, that's not necessary for you to have a good marriage that glorifies me and is beneficial to both of you.
Right.
So that was something I could let go of. That's a preference, not
That's
a
good.
need.
Yeah.
So, so I think that if you're single and listening to this, or advising people who are single, that's been something that I've used a lot and has resonated with a lot of young women I've talked to about spending your time single, thinking through that list.
Yep.
And especially if you've dated, like, okay, there are some things you've learned along the way,
watched your
hopefully.
friends date.
Or even through your friends. Like, what are the things that didn't work for you, or you see in other relationships that you know are a game changer for you? So I think that that's a worthwhile endeavor.
Yeah. Let's talk other challenges in dating, kind of while we're in this area, because there's many challenges.
Yeah, we cannot
dating.
cover them all here.
But some of the themes that we learned, I think the communication, the conflict resolution, the preferences.
Yeah, we learned all of that in dating, right?
things that we enjoy, the mutual connections and commonality, like all of that. Those are not just dating.
Right.
That's why I know you're laughing. We're 10 years into marriage, and we're still learning those things.
Yes.
Everyone who's married for any length of time, if they're honest, they'll tell you that they're still learning those things.
Yes.
But that's where I think it is so important when you're dating to figure out, how do you handle conflict? How do you communicate?
Yes.
How do you negotiate spending your time and navigate all of those things?
Right.
That is a big deal. And if you find yourself constantly like giving in or acquiescing on the other person's wants and needs, and you aren't like being met halfway, or if it's not like a partnership, it's not working. Like, let's be honest.
So here's what I love that you just said, and I don't even know if you realized it, and it's a small thing, but it's a huge thing. You said, what are you doing? And how are you responding? Not the other person. Now, that's important too, especially in dating, because you don't want to yoke yourself to somebody who's really unhealthy habits in that area and is not addressing them.
Right.
But to realize really early on, and especially in dating, that's the time to realize it, that you have control over yourself and how you respond. And by that, that does not mean that I just choose that, well, I'm just not ever going to get angry.
Right.
Okay, maybe not, but it is within my control to say, wow, I notice that I get angry with this person a lot. Why is that happening? And to wrestle with the Lord, to get counseling if you need, whether that's wise counsel from a mentor or a more professional counseling relationship. But what are the things within myself that I can address? And I think that is so important that if you can start that process in dating, that sets you up for marriage really well. I read a book in recent years that talked about, it was a marriage book and it was specifically for wives, but it was talking about how we can have goals and we can have desires in marriage. And the difference being the goals are things that are within my control. The desires are things that involve you as my spouse. Person. Well, I can't control you in that.
Right.
And so I can desire that in our relationship, we have good communication. Well, that's a desire because that rests on you as well. But I can have a goal that as a wife, I communicate in a healthy manner with my husband.
Right.
And so that is within my power to work on with the Lord's help. And again, with wise counsel, but to realize that when you enter into a relationship with someone else, it does not work for you to enter in with the goal to change them, to fit you. That is a dead end road.
There's a principle that we often talk about of I'm only responsible for myself. I'm responsible to me, and I'm not responsible for you or for what you do with what I think or feel. And so even how that plays out.
And I have responsibilities to you, but I am not responsible for you and what you do with those things.
And so even as that plays out in things like communication, it you have to really think through, how am I communicating my wants, my goals, my needs? And so if women, if you're listening to this, men are usually pretty dull when it comes to these kinds of things, and you have to be really clear because we are not mind readers. You might say multiple times, I'm hungry, but what you're really meaning is, would you make me a sandwich? And that's a very different a statement versus a question. To a guy. You might say, I'm hungry, and I'm like, okay, I don't, what does that mean? Do you want to go get something to eat? And you're like, no. We can
get on to all kinds of memes and funny stories pizza? About these things.
No, I just need you to tell me. So
clarity.
That's that responsibility to communicate what's really in your head. And sometimes, and I'll knock on the guys here sometimes guys aren't good at communicating their emotions or they don't really know. They just feel a certain way. And so you need to sort those things out. So
I mean, to take a more relationship-based example is well, if I'm upset about something, if you hurt my feelings, for our relationship to work well, I'm responsible to you to tell you. Now, I'm also responsible to do that in a respectful way that is kind and is healthy. And, if I just throw a fit around the house and don't tell you what's wrong and slam doors and things like that, well, I'm not fulfilling my responsibilities to you as your wife, because that's not respectful. It's not helpful. It's not kind. But if I tell you that and you don't like it, and now you're upset, I'm not responsible for fixing that. I may have responsibilities to you to be willing to listen, to be willing to talk that out, but I'm not responsible for fixing your emotions. And you're also not responsible for fixing mine. So, and this is deep and complicated and things that we wrestle through every day. But I think the more that you can pay attention to those habits in your dating and make sure you have healthy patterns for dealing with communication, for dealing with conflict. Those are the foundational things that are far more important than Does he like to dance? Does she like baseball?
because this also very much leads into where a lot of high school dating goes is physical, sexual boundaries.
Sure.
Right. And so that principle of I'm responsible to and for, and understanding that, like, for Christian students, parents who are listening, pastors who are listening, like, if you're not encouraging or giving your students these tools, these things to help them understand, like, you should be communicating up front, hey, boyfriend, girlfriend, I will not send you inappropriate pictures. I will not sext you. I will not have sex with you. I will not, right? What are those boundaries? To be clear, that is your responsibility to communicate that.
Right.
And if the person that you're dating or interested in doesn't abide by those, you should and have every right to end that relationship.
Kindly and lovingly, but yes.
But to hold the line.
Yes, absolutely
because
hold a boundary.
You've given your boundary.
Right.
And if you students, if you're listening to this, or parents and pastors that are coming alongside, like, if your student is entering a relationship, a dating relationship, and they have not had a conversation about those kinds of things, the physical boundaries, and we say physical boundaries, this also means sexual boundaries.
Sure.
Because with use of
One leads to
technology,
the other,
it's I totally get, like, almost every high school relationship right now has some level of, like, sexting involved, sending inappropriate pictures. That is very much a part of the culture and dating right now. And so if you've not articulated that is not, you're not going to do that, that's not okay. If you haven't formed your own opinions on that, man, do you need to start there.
Well, and I would even say some of this gets into, like, parent-child relationship too. So parents being clear with your students what your expectations are. And I am a big proponent of parents, check your kids' phones. Check their phones and let them know. It should be an open, known thing. Your phone, especially if you're paying for it, man. I pay for that phone. I own it. And so we have little kids, but boy, that's how it's going to go down. And so for them to know that, and I actually think that's a great tool for students to use to say, hey, I will not engage in sexting and inappropriate pictures. And you should know if you send them to me, my mom's going to see it. Blame me. Go for it. Like,
blame the parents.
So have those boundaries and things in place. And again, like I said, I think I was talking earlier about, like, this list of your desires and whatnot, but also of what your boundaries are. And to be thinking through those before you are in these situations, before the emotions and hormones take over, and having those conversations early and often with yourself. And if we're talking about students, minors, especially kids who are under your roof, parents, be having those conversations openly, honestly, and often. And if it's awkward, let it be awkward. But go ahead and have it, because you're going to set a really great model for your students.
And just a reminder, Greg talked last episode about like a cell phone technology contract. So work those things in. That's really good. That was a really good idea. So things like that. To be clear, to implement this principle of responsibility to and responsibility for. So I think the other big point that, I know we're running out of time here, I wanted to make sure that we mention that we, Bethany, you and I have both learned that any pastor or parent who's listening to this has probably learned, if you're married especially, marriage isn't the cure to all things difficult. Marriage isn't the cure to your lust and pornography issues. Marriage isn't the cure to your communication problems.
To your loneliness.
to your loneliness.
Your lack of confidence. We can go on and on. And I think that fairy tale image of you meet your person and you live happily ever after, that is not true until I pass from this world and enter into heaven as the bride of Christ. And that is the marriage where things will be happily ever after. But as long as I am walking this earth, it's like I said earlier, we are two broken, sinful people, and we will have trouble. And not I always am worried that that's going to sound like a sentence, a marriage sentence. No, there's really great and wonderful things that come out of marriage, but they require work.
Yep.
And it is not an easy path.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, don't hear us wrong. Marriage is amazing.
Right.
I love being married to you.
That's good. I love being married to you too.
But I agree. It is work and it is hard. And if I'm honest, there are things that as a young single adult who I thought was mature, I thought, man, marriage will fix some of these things. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that I honestly ever had anybody tell me otherwise.
Right.
So I know we've both said we want to be a proponent of like, no, we want to be honest and open with people because we didn't always have people do that with us. It is work. You do learn a lot.
Or people were honest with us and we didn't listen. That's also
that's
fair too.
Maybe fair too.
But just to be realistic. But I can hear someone, one of our old mentors.
I told them that.
Don't tell them.
Yeah.
But I do think that idea that in dating, it's laying foundations and it's learning things about yourself that can lend a foundation for marriage.
Yeah.
But what is your goal in marriage? What are you going into it looking for?
Yeah.
Because if you're going into it looking for something to complete you and fulfill you, you're looking in the wrong place.
Yep.
That is Jesus.
Yes.
And Jesus is the only one who can do that. And he can do that. Let's be very clear. He can do that whether you're single or married. And whether you're single or married, he's the only one who can do that. So if you are well beyond college or 20s or young adulthood and you are still single, well, Jesus can still fulfill you and you can do wonderful things in this world. You don't need to be married. I want to celebrate the singles.
Amen.
Amen. But if marriage is also your path, your spouse is not responsible for that. That is Jesus's role. Yep. And so I think if instead we go into marriage with how does our marriage move each of us towards Christ? Yep. Am I always looking for how do I support Eric in becoming more Christ-like, in glorifying God, in his walk with Christ? And if that's always my motivation, well, then we're going to do some awesome things. Right. And I'm going to probably be at least a pretty good wife. I'm not going to get it right every day, but hopefully I'll be a pretty good wife.
Yeah, you're a very good wife. I think one of the things, last principle we'll share on this conversation that we often do with couples that we do premarital counseling with is we share this principle that we learned along the way in our process. And it's, if you think of a triangle, right, there's three corners to a triangle. If the top of the triangle is the Lord and the two bottom corners are you and me, right? So you and your partner, your spouse. Oftentimes in relationship, you want to like pursue one or the other, each other. And so the left corner pursues the right corner and the right corner pursues the left corner. And the reality is, in order for you and I as husband and wife to grow close in our relationship with each other, we can't be in pursuit of each other. We need to be in pursuit of the Lord. Yeah. And so as we grow in our relationship with the Lord, that vertical part of the triangle, the upwards trajectory of our right relationship with God, the closer we get to him, then the closer we are to each other. Yeah. The smaller the triangle becomes, and I can attest to this because there are many times in my marriage where I've pursued you and I'm not pursuing the Lord. I'm not pursuing that vertical relationship with the Lord. I'm pursuing you horizontally. I'm trying to be your everything. I'm trying to pursue you in that context. And I'm not thinking about God. And I'm now idolizing you instead of the Lord. Right. And I'm pursuing that relationship with you versus him.
And from a cultural standpoint, I think we sometimes look at that as like, he idolizes me. He thinks I'm amazing. He wants me. And it's like, actually, when that lives out, that is too much pressure on someone. That's not fair to that person to have those expectations on them.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Bethany, for being willing to join me on this. I think it went well. I don't know if we were
willing to join you
in this
marriage
conversation
or podcast or
and
all,
in marriage to be willing to share
some
of our history in all this, and that we don't have all the answers. I think the bottom line is whether you're single and looking for your future spouse, or you're a parent or a pastor, anyone dealing with dating and marriage, this is an episode for you, just because we're longing to share some of the things that we've learned, not because we have all the answers, but mostly because we've learned from what not to do. So we wanted to add value to you and to your ministry. So we hope that this episode has done that. Pursuing
the Lord and pursuing conversation and understanding that this stuff is messy and hard. And so if somebody's in the middle of the mess of it, boy, we get that. And so there's no judgment for that. But,
for sure.
But pursuing the Lord in the midst of it.
For sure. Well, as always, to our listeners, thank you. Thank you so much. If you would be so kind as to rate and review this podcast, subscribe so that you get upcoming episodes and notifications about them. We would be honored if you do that. We'd also love if you have any further, maybe follow-up questions for Bethany and I. You can always submit those to us via email or DM us on social media. And so we'd be honored to be a resource to you in any way, shape, or form.
Yep.
All right. Thanks very much for tuning in.
Thanks.
Well, guys, I think that's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. We'd be really honored if you went ahead and subscribed to the podcast, and that way you can just kind of stay up to date with the episodes that we're posting in the future. To learn more about Momentum Ministry Partners and our many other resources, please be sure to follow us on social media at Momentum Ministry Partners, or check out our website, www.buildmomentum.org.